We're in week 6 of a 7-week series through Hebrews that we're calling Just Jesus. And so next Sunday, we'll have the conclusion to that message. And then 2 weeks from today, September 30th, we kick off a brand new series called The Gospel. Good news in all of life. And so that's going to be a great series to be a part of, to follow up this series on Hebrews as we talk about what the gospel is, how we contextualize the gospel to our lives, how we share the gospel with our friends, how we live in the gospel, in the good news every day of our life. And so if you are a part of that series, you're going to be here for that series, it'll be a good experience for you. But if you get into a group, it will be a great experience for you. That's kind of the way this series is designed. To maximize it, to get the most benefit out of it, you need to trek with a small group through that 8-week series. And so we have about 40 small groups that we've stood up, new groups, in addition to the groups that we already have, so that we have enough groups for you guys to get involved in. On your seats, there's a little booklet there that lists all the groups. So there is a group, I believe, pretty much every day of the week. There are women's groups, there are men's groups, there are online groups if a specific day doesn't work for you. There are empty nester groups, there are young married groups. And Janelle and I are leading a group of young married, so 35 and under. Just feel like God's calling us to kind of invest in young married couples. And so we're opening up our home. And if that fits you, we hope that you'll come and journey with us. So today, you can go out and sign up for groups before you leave. Groups will kick off this week. And this week is a kind of, let's get to know each other. Let's talk about what's coming up. So this is a perfect time to jump in. There's also resources out there. There's a book called The Gospel Primer that we're going to go through as a small group. So you can buy that today as well. And if you don't have the resources to buy that, we will give that to you for free. We don't want any barriers in your way to get into a group. So this is super important. 2 of our values here are growth and community. And growth and community are kind of groups are our strategy for those 2 things. So when you get into a group, you find community and you find the necessary relationships and tools to grow in your faith. So I really want to challenge you to dive into a group for this next series. Now, if you're just jumping in with us today, you are brand new here. You're on the tail end of a series that we're in. So let me just give you a quick snapshot of what's going on so you have context for today. So Hebrews is a book in the Bible, a letter written to a group of Jewish believers who grew up in their Jewish faith, and then they followed Jesus after the resurrection. So they converted from Judaism to Christianity. They're following Jesus during a time of intense and violent persecution. So Rome is on a mission of mass genocide. Their mission is to end Christianity. And in order to end Christianity, they need to end Christians. Okay, if there are no Christians, there is no movement. So they're trying to eliminate all of the Christians. And a lot of these former Jews are going through this intense persecution, and they are deciding to return to their former faith. And this letter is written to convince them to stay the course, to persevere, to endure until the very end. And they're asking what really are the 2 most important questions of faith that we've asked throughout this series. And it's these 2 questions. Is it true? Is it worth it? Is it true? Is it worth it? Is Jesus really who he said he was? Did Jesus really raise from the dead? Is Jesus really Lord? Because if it's true, then why are we losing? Why is Rome winning? Why are we suffering? And if it is true, I'm just not sure it's worth it anymore. I don't know that I want to risk life and limb to follow Jesus. And so they were asking these 2 questions, and these 2 questions are really foundational to faith. See, our circumstances here in the 21st century and 21st century America are significantly different than they were in first century Palestine, but these questions are very much still the same. And they're relevant. And so if you are thinking about following Jesus, you're asking these 2 questions. Before you started following Jesus, you asked yourself these 2 questions. As you're walking with Jesus and Jesus is calling you to something deeper, maybe calling you out of your comfort zone, you're starting to ask these questions. And here's the thing, you will ask these questions throughout your journey. You're not going to just ask them one time, I promise you. Throughout your journey, there will be times, there will be circumstances that cause you to ask these questions. And you may never doubt that it's true. But depending on what Jesus is calling you to, depending on what he's asking you to do, you might ask this question: is it worth it? If you're in an intense season of pain and suffering, you may ask that question: is it worth it? See, that's just human nature. All of us prefer the path of least resistance. The problem with the path of least resistance is that it was never the path of Jesus. Jesus does not lead us on a path of least resistance because that doesn't require any faith. And so the path of least resistance is always preferred, but it's never productive. It's always preferred, but it's never productive. That's the path we want to take, but we never benefit from that. The people who've traveled a difficult path, either by choice or by circumstance, are usually the people, think about this, they're usually the people that we have the most admiration for because of their courage and their character. Character is developed on the difficult path. That's where we build character. That the difficult path is the thing that produces the qualities we admire most in people. The path of least resistance usually produces the qualities we admire least in people. The path of least resistance does not grow our faith because it doesn't require faith. And God's primary objective for you, God's primary objective for me, is to grow our faith. God wants big faith in our lives. And the writer of Hebrews tells us why in chapter 11, verse 6. He says this: without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now, some of you have tried to please God by church attendance, and you've tried to please God by good works, and you've tried to please God by Bible reading, and all those are good things. You should do all of those things. But the thing that pleases God the most, the thing that pleases God, is big faith. Big faith. God is always blown away by his kids when they don't have all the answers, they don't know all the steps, they don't know the full plan, but they walk forward in faith anyway. And in chapter 11, the author is going to brag on some of God's kids. For 10 chapters now, he has been making the case for why we can believe it's true and how we can know it's worth it. And now in chapter 11, he's going to prove it with some real life examples. How many of you read reviews before you buy anything, right? I read reviews about everything I purchase. I don't buy a toothbrush without reading a review, okay? I know the best ones that are out there right now on the market. I want to know the experiences that other people have had with the product I'm considering buying. And so if you're like me, we read reviews because we want the answer to two questions. You know what they are? Is it true? And is it worth it? Does this thing really work? Does it do what it says it will do? And is it worth the cost? That's why we read reviews. And so Hebrews 11, listen, is the Yelp of faith, okay? Is the Yelp of faith. You want to know if it's true. You want to know if it's worth it. One chapter in the Bible will tell you so. Hebrews chapter 11 will tell you if the Christian faith is true and if the Christian faith is worth it. So he starts off in chapter 11. He starts off by defining faith. So he sets the tone for the rest of the chapter. Here's what faith is, he says. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith is more than simply believing in Jesus. Faith is primarily about living in Jesus. Faith is not a feeling, it is a foundation. It's a solid place to stand when everything else around us is crumbling. Faith is a posture in which we live. So when we talk about growing in our faith, we're not talking about increasing our belief. Okay? I can't believe in Jesus any more than I believe in Jesus right now, even if he showed up. I believe in Jesus. I can't increase my belief in Jesus. So when we talk about growing in our faith, we are not talking about increasing our belief. We are talking about strengthening our foundation. The stronger our foundation, the stronger our disposition when life gets tough. So a weak faith will always result in a weak life. A strong faith will always result in a strong life. And so for the rest of this chapter, he lays out for us men and women who have lived strong lives because they had a strong faith. So here are Faith's 5-star reviews. We're just going to walk through this chapter and pick out a couple of these. So in verse 7, he says this: "By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear," that's always a good kind of fear, "built an ark to save his family." So God comes to Noah and he says, "Noah, I want you to build an ark." And Noah says, "What's an ark?" And God says, "It's a boat." And he says, "What's a boat?" "It's a thing that floats on water." "Where's the water?" "I'm bringing the water to you through a flood." "What's a flood?" "It's what happens when there's a lot of rain." "What's rain?" "Just build the dang boat, okay? Build the boat." Probably didn't say that, but it's my interpretation. These were things that Noah had never seen. And here's what his faith teaches us. That faith is doing what God calls you to do, even if you don't know what it is you're doing. You ever been in that position? Doing the thing that God calls you to do, even if you don't know what it is that you're doing. By faith, I'm your lead pastor. I don't know what I'm doing. 9 years I've been in this role. I thought, I'll figure it out. Here's what I figured out. I'll never figure it out. By faith, we parent our children. Anybody figured that out? You're writing the book on that? No, by faith, we do the things that God calls us to do, even though we don't know what it is we're doing. Noah had no concept of a flood. He had no concept of a cruise ship. God said, build a boat, and he believed that it was true and that it was worth it, and the rains came, and the floods rose, and the boat floated, and Noah was glad he did. Verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though, listen, he did not know where he was going. So God tells Abraham to pack up everything he owns and to leave everything he knows. Now, this is a great adventure if you're 25 years old. Abraham is 75 years old. It is a little late in life for a relocation. All right, and so he opens up Waze on his smartphone. He says, okay, God, give me the address. And God says, that's too easy. Like, you just go, and I'll show you the way as you go. He doesn't just leave his hometown. He leaves for an unknown destination. And Abraham teaches us this about faith, that faith is taking step one without knowing step two. Faith is taking the first step without any idea of what the second step is going to be. Now, some of you are trying to sort out what God's asking you to do, and you're trying to lay out all the steps. You're trying to see to the very end. You're trying to measure all the steps before you say yes. And so you're not moving, and the reason you're not moving is because God will not give you step two until by faith you take step one. See, most of us want the whole plan. I'm one of those that wants the whole plan. Here's the problem with that. That's the path of least resistance. That path doesn't require any faith. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. So for most of us, when God says go, our response is not where, it is why. God, why would I do that? God, why are you calling me to do this thing right now? Remember when your kids were young and everything you asked them to do was followed by this question? Why? Don't run with a sucker in your mouth. Why? Don't stick your finger in an electrical outlet. Why? Don't eat food off the floor. Why? Because you're 13, okay? It's weird when you do that now. Jeez, right? All of those instructions, all of those little instructions were for their benefit. We were trying to lead them in a better direction. See, as parents, we have the long game in mind. Our kids can only see the short game, right? We can see further than our kids. So you remember that when God gives you a calling and you're tempted to ask why. Remember that God sees further than you do. He's got the whole picture. We don't. He's got the best interest of your life in mind as well as the best interest of his kingdom. That's why. So we can be confident in step one, knowing that step two is on the way. And as Abraham goes, God begins to give them step two. He and Sarah are going to have a baby. And Abraham's thinking, wait a minute, I'm 75. She's 65. And God says, right, you're still a little young. Still a little young. If we do this now, people can think that you did this all on your own, your love, your young, spry age. Let's just wait and make sure that nothing works. Okay, let's wait till then. And then we'll do this. And here's what verse 11 says. By faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Here's the promise. The promise was that God would make them into a great nation. The nation of Israel, the nation that we now know as the nation of Israel. But the problem was they didn't have any kids. And you can't be a great nation if you don't have at least one child. And so Abraham and Sarah, their life teaches this about faith, that faith is knowing that our problem is no problem for our God. And some of you today, you are staring a giant problem in the face. And maybe you came just to hear this. You need to be reminded of this. God is bigger than your problem. God loves you. God is for you. And he is not just interested in showing up for you. He is interested in showing off for you, because that's the way God does things. And so at the ripe old age of 90 and 100, Abraham and Sarah had their first child, and they named him Isaac. God took 25 years to make good on that promise. And about 15 years after the fact, he throws a curveball to Abraham. And he tells him to go and sacrifice Isaac. And here's what the writer of Hebrews says. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises of God was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Now, you can read this story in Genesis chapter 22. And what you'll find there is that when God calls Abraham to go sacrifice Isaac, Abraham doesn't ask any questions. Now, this could be because Isaac is now a teenager. And if you've had teenagers or had teenagers, you can understand the lack of hesitation, okay? Isaac, come here, boy. I'm on a road trip. Well, the reason that Abraham is quick to respond to God's call is because God had made a covenant with him. We talked about covenant last week, that it is one of the two major themes that runs from the beginning to the end of the Bible. And a covenant is a promise based on relationship. It means that everything that I have belongs to you, and everything you have belongs to me. If we're in a covenant, that's what that means. What's mine is yours, what yours is mine. That's why we call marriage a covenant. Right? This is part of the one flesh. Everything that your spouse has belongs to you. Everything that you have belongs to your spouse. That's what it means to be in a covenant with somebody. And Abraham understood this concept of covenant, which meant that Isaac did not belong to him. Isaac belonged to his covenant partner, God. And so he trusted that whatever God had planned for Isaac was better than what he could ever plan on his own. And so Abraham gives us another lesson in faith, that faith is believing that wherever God is leading is better than where you are. Now, we've mentioned this around here lots in the past. Wherever God is leading you is better than where you are. God has more vision. God knows more of the plan. And so if God is leading you this direction, it is because he is leading you somewhere that is better than where you are right now. If Abraham loved Isaac going up the mountain, imagine how much he loved him coming down. His life was better having walked up the mountain of sacrifice. His relationships were better having walked up the mountain of sacrifice. His faith was bigger having walked up the mountain of sacrifice. And if God is leading you up that mountain, it is because he's trying to take you somewhere better than where you are. And so he goes on to talk about the faith of Isaac and the faith of his son Jacob and the faith of Jacob's son Joshua and the faith of Moses and then, Joseph, Jacob's son. And then Joshua's faith, who took over for Moses as he led them into the promised land. He talks about that in here. And if you know the Battle of Jericho, the plan was not, it didn't involve airstrikes or it didn't involve tanks or it didn't involve paratroopers. It was a 6-day walkathon. That was the strategy for taking over Jericho. 6 days walking around the city, led by a marching band. And then on day 7, God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, here's what we're going to do. You're going to have the priests blow their trumpets. And then you're going to yell really loudly. It's going to be epic. It's going to be live, lit. Okay? Whatever the vernacular is that the kids use these days. That's what it's going to be. Okay? Verse 30, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell. And after the army had marched around them for 7 days, and we learn this about faith, that faith is obeying what seems irrational so that God can do what seems impossible. Like, you understand there are more sensible ways to take down the walls of a city. There are better strategic options than marching bands and megaphones. But not if you want them to be certain that God is giving the victory. Outside of that, you didn't need God's involvement. The secret sauce to every victory is Jesus. Sometimes God calls us to do crazy, radical things, to abandon common sense, to abandon rational thinking, and step out in faith and be willing to get uncomfortable for his cause. Sometimes God calls us to be foolish. Paul says that's what the gospel is. He says the gospel is foolishness to men. God always uses foolishness. This Bible is littered with foolish people who acted out of simple obedience because God never does what's convenient or rational. God is always and only interested in doing the impossible. And so the sweet spot of our faith is when our circumstances are bigger than us. If our circumstances aren't greater than us, then we can do it all by ourselves. We don't need Jesus. But my faith never grows by relying on me. Your faith never grows by relying on you. Our faith grows when we become utterly dependent on God to do what we cannot do. That does not happen on the path of least resistance. See, the reason so many of us struggle with faith is because we don't like to struggle with anything. We prefer easy street. We really do prefer the path of least resistance. We want things to be easy. We want life to be struggle-free. And the point of Hebrews 11 is to remind those early followers and to remind us of Israel's journey that God called us to a life of faith and obedience that leads to a life of fullness and freedom. And most of us, we'd just rather play it safe. We just don't want to risk it. We just kind of want to stay comfortable in our zone. You know, one of my favorite Olympic sports is gymnastics. And I'm amazed at what gymnasts can do with their bodies, flipping and twisting and landing on 2 feet is pretty amazing. But the routine that wrecks me the most is the balance beam. I don't know if anybody is like this, but when they get up on the balance beam, I'm like a nervous wreck. That just seems super unsafe. Whose idea? was that? I mean, this thing is 4 inches wide, and they're going to flip and twist and do all this stuff on the balance beam. But I look at that and I think this is a perfect example of the Christian life. Jesus said, wide is the road that leads to destruction, and many will choose that road, but narrow is the road that leads to life. Narrow is the road that leads to life. This is not easy to walk on. If you've ever tried it, it takes some concentration, it takes some focus, it takes some perseverance, and it takes a little bit of faith. And here's the thing, I brought this out here for you to see, that God, this is the life He's called you to. He's called all of us to follow Him by being these balance beam believers, but many of us, we settle for cushion Christianity. And cushion Christianity is where we just sit back and we watch. And the reason a lot of Christians just sit back and watch is because they were on this beam at one point in time and things didn't go well and they fell off. And they're thinking, I'm not going to get back up on there. I'm just going to sit and watch. But it wasn't like that when we started out, right? When we started out, there was exhilaration, there was excitement, there was opportunity. All right, and we started to walk a little bit towards Jesus, and the more we walk, the stronger we felt. But then life happens, right? And things became difficult. And we thought that following Jesus was supposed to be easy. Hang on. Following Jesus doesn't make life easier. I'm telling you right now. This doesn't make life easier. And so we started to question things. Like, is it true? Is it worth it? God, I just don't know that I want to spend a whole lot of time up here because I feel a little unsteady, and I really want to follow you, but I don't want to follow you like this, so I'm just going to assume a safer position here, and I'm just going to climb down here and do it like this, okay? Okay. Now I'm with you, Jesus. Okay? Thank you. This is so much better. God, I will follow you anywhere, okay? I just need a stable job with good income, preferably 6 figures if you don't mind, and good benefits like health, because I like my health, as you can tell. It's very important to me. And how about a retirement package? If I don't have to worry about retirement, I can really focus on following you, okay? Keep my attention on you. And I want you to sign me up for some mission trips. I will go anywhere in the tri-state area. Okay, but I can't go overseas. Like I don't do planes, not because I don't like flying, but just all the germs and people. And did you see that plane that landed like with 100 sick people? No thanks, God. I'm not doing that. Ain't got time for that. All right. And I'll tell you what, you've talked a lot about loving your neighbor as yourself, and I want to be all in on that. So if you could bring me some neighbors like myself to love, I'll knock it out of the park. And in a cul-de-sac would be great. There's less traffic in a cul-de-sac, and you just want to keep it safe, right? And so this is kind of how a lot of us follow Jesus, just like this, just holding on. We kind of go through life, not taking any risks, just playing it safe, and then it's time for the dismount. Right? And so, we open up heaven's gate and we climb off this beam and we turn around and look at the judge. And I think God looks at that and He says, really? That's your routine? And you just played it safe, like you didn't take a single risk. You never fell one time, which means that you never got to experience what it feels like to fall into my arms. You never got to experience what it's like for me to catch you on your way down. You never got to understand me as your rescuer. Come on, my son took 2 beams for you. You can't walk on one for me? I love this quote by A.W. Tozer. He said, God is looking for people through whom he can do the impossible. And what a pity. We plan only things we can do by ourselves. And we settle for this weak version of Christianity. We settle for Christian Christianity when we're called to be balance beam believers. One requires nothing. One requires everything. One is safe. One is risky. One doesn't need Jesus at all. One can't do it without him. It takes 0 faith to sit and watch. It takes every ounce of faith you have to climb up on the beam and do the routine. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Do you know how to walk across a balance beam? I looked this up because I thought it would be important for my own routine. So here's what they'll say. If you're learning to walk on the balance beam, they say chest out, chin up, fix your eyes on the end of the beam. I thought that's a pretty amazing metaphor for life. Like this life that Jesus has called us to only works when our chest is out, our chin is up, and our eyes are focused on the end. See, chest out and chin up, that's confidence. Eyes on the end is assurance. We know who's got us, so we can walk confidently, and we know where we're going, so we can walk assuredly. And the reason that so many of us fall in our faith is because we lose our posture and we lose our focus. We take our eyes off the end and we only look at where we are right now. When you look down at your feet, your chest is no longer up. Your chin is no longer up. And you are in for an epic fall. And so he starts the next chapter, chapter 12, with a different metaphor, but the same idea. He gives us our reference point. He says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. So he's painting this picture of a race, and lined up around this race that we're all running with is this great cloud of witnesses. You know who the great cloud of witnesses are? All the people he just talked about. The heroes of the faith, the saints of old. They are all standing around and they are cheering you on. So you're running this race, called faith, and there's Abraham, he's yelling your name, and Noah is cheering for you, and Sarah's got this sign out there that says, hey, nobody better. And then Joshua comes out, he brings the band, right? There's trumpets. They are blaring for you. And there are others. Those who've gone before us, and Scripture doesn't say a whole lot about this, but here's what I believe. I believe that those who've gone before us, those who've influenced our faith, those who we have loved in the faith are there. They are surrounding us. They are cheering us on. So your grandmother who taught you about Jesus, your dad who showed you what the love of a heavenly Father was like by loving you in truth and in grace, and your brother, your sister, your aunts, your uncles, those people who lived this amazing life, who had this amazing faith that was worth imitating. They're all there, and they're yelling for you, and they're cheering for you. And then standing at the finish line is Jesus. He's already finished this race. And And he's just there and he's waiting for you and he's cheering for you. And it's just this amazing picture that he's writing to try to inspire them that this is true and this is worth it. You stay in this race. You are not alone. We're cheering for you. A few years ago, I ran my first race. I ran the Flying Pig, the half marathon, because I'm only half crazy. And I'd never run a race before, not a 5K, not a 10K. My philosophy was always, it is much easier to drive than to run or walk. And I just didn't like running. I hated running. I abhorred running. But something in me, I can't explain it, wanted to run this race. And so I just went for it. And I knew that the only way I was going to get off the cushion of the couch was to put my name in there, was to sign up for it. If I just thought about it, if I thought, you know what, I'll do the training first. Like I'll do step 2, step 3, and step 4. I'd always back up and go, yeah, I'm not doing step 1. That was to sign up. And so I took step 1. I signed up. And because I put my name in there, I put in the training. And I remember starting the training, first day of training, I thought, oh, you're an idiot. Second day of training, I thought, you're an idiot. Third day of training, what did I do? There's no way I can make it. Fourth day of training, I need a break. Fifth day of training, let's take a break again. Sixth day of training, help me, Jesus. And then 2 miles became 3, and 3 miles became 4, and 4 became 6, and 6 became 8, and then 10, and then 12. And then on race day, I ran not 13 miles, 13.1. Don't take that 0.1 from me. Worked for that. But here's the thing, race day came, and it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And some of you have been down there, you've run the race, or you've been along the sides and cheering for people. And it was just this electric atmosphere. I'm running with, I've been training all by myself, right? It's just me. And now I'm running with thousands of people, which meant the odds were great that I would beat some of them, okay? That was encouraging. I'm running with thousands of people, and there are thousands of other people who are like lining the streets with signs and yelling. And I felt like, man, they're all here for me. Like it felt like they were just all cheering for Shawn out here. And it was just exactly what the author was talking about in Hebrews 12. And I was just emotional during the race because I thought about this passage of scripture the whole time. That's what it felt like. Such an incredible metaphor for life. And the last mile by far was the hardest stretch for me. I turned the corner and I see the finish line and I started to cramp up so badly that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep running. I thought I was going to have to walk across the finish line. And then I saw Janelle, and I saw Campbell, and I saw Carter, my great cloud of witnesses. And I found some endurance to keep going. And I crossed the finish line. And you guys, I came in 6,669th place. Which in most races doesn't earn you a medal. I got a medal for that. It's amazing. Because the thing about the Flying Pig, and I've never run another race to know if this is true or not, you don't get a medal for winning. You get one for finishing. Some of you today, you are running well, you have trained hard, you're dug in, you're running a good race, you're focused, your chest is out, your chin is up, your eye is fixed on the end. You are confident of what you hope for. You are assured of what you cannot see. You keep running. Stay the course. Some of you today, you are tired and you are worn out and you're just not sure you can keep going. You're starting to cramp up. And every step is painful. And you're just ready to quit. And so here's the question I have for you. What is hindering you right now? What sin is hindering you? What circumstance is hindering you? What has you entangled today that you need to get untangled from? You are running a good race. What has stepped in front of you? See beyond it. See beyond it to the finish line. I want you to know we are running with you. I am running with you. You are not running alone. Lift your head. Lift your chin. Catch a glimpse of Jesus, who for the joy set before him, the author says, endured the cross, scorning its shame. Verse 3, he says this, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Catch a glimpse of Jesus. And know this about Jesus, he nearly quit the race. The Garden of Gethsemane, right, the night before his crucifixion, Jesus almost threw in the towel. He is sweating literally drops of blood because of so much anxiety and pressure about what was in front of him. And he wasn't sure that he could do it. He wasn't sure it was worth it. And in his time of prayer, God lifts his chin up to see the end. This is what you're running for, Jesus. All these people, they're depending on you. They need you. And Jesus stands up and he keeps running for your sake. And I'm telling you, you keep running for his. He did not quit on you. Don't you quit on him. And there's some of you here today that you're watching. Something in you wants to get in, but you're just not sure. Not sure if it's true, not sure if it's worth it. And the cushion is comfortable. I get it. But life is in the race. Life is in the race. You sign up, you start running. It won't be easy. I assure you that. Following Jesus will not make your life easier, but it will make your life better. And that's the thing about running. I mean, physically running, it is not easy. But it makes your life better. Stronger. Healthier. That's the benefit of doing the hard business of running. And it's the same in running this race of faith. It is not easy, but it will make you better, and it will make you healthier, and it will make you stronger. And here's the best news of all. You don't have to win this race. It's already been won. Jesus has won this race. He is standing at the finish line, and his victory means victory for all of us. Jesus in the Hebrew is Yeshua. Yeshua means victory. His very name is your victory, my victory. We don't have to win. We just have to finish. And Jesus is standing at the finish line, and he's waiting for you to cross, and he's got something much more valuable than a medal. He has for you a crown. And in Revelation 2, Jesus shows up, and God gives John this amazing picture of heaven to help all the people who are running in this race to see beyond their circumstances, to see beyond their persecution. And Jesus shows up and he says this, he says, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Don't you quit. Don't you give up. Where I am is better than where you are. So you stay in it. You run. I'm cheering you on, and I have for you a crown that will never rust, that will never wear out, and it will be yours for eternity. And it's true. And it's worth it. Father, help us to see that. And I know in a room this size, there are people who are struggling with those questions. And life has been difficult, and life has been unfair. I pray for your endurance today. I pray that you would lift our chin, that you would give us confidence. And that, God, we would look past where we are to see you, the author and perfecter of our faith. Help us to run, to not grow weary, to not lose heart, because the victory has already been won. And Father, we celebrate communion right now, this symbol that we engage in every week that reminds us of the victory, your victory over death, your victory over sin, your victory over the grave. So as we sit at your feet, lift our eyes to you. In Jesus' name.